Welcome to Bio 211D Plant Physiology, Unit 4, Session 5, the nitrogen cycle. And by the close of this session, you should be able to describe the nitrogen cycle, explain the various components of the nitrogen cycle, state the sources and sinks of nitrogen in the biosphere, explain various factors that influence the nitrogen cycle, and describe the interconversion of nitrogen between living organisms and their surroundings. So all living organisms require a source of nitrogen, which is necessary for the synthesis of amino acids, nucleotides, and other compounds. Plants can generally use either ammonia or nitrate as their sole source of nitrogen, but vertebrates must obtain nitrogen in the form of amino acids, protein, or other organic compounds from both plants and other animals. So when we eat meat, fish, vegetables, or other plants and animal food products, we obtain our nitrogen requirements from them. Only a few organisms such as the cyanobacteria, also known as the blue-green algae, and many species of soil bacteria that live symbiotically on the roots of some plants are capable of converting or fixing atmospheric nitrogen to ammonia. Other bacteria oxidize ammonia to nitrites and nitrates. Other bacteria such as denitrifying bacteria convert nitrate to nitrite, which is released into the atmosphere, to nitrate to nitrogen, which is released into the atmosphere. Thus, in addition to the global carbon and oxygen cycle, nitrogen cycle operates in the biosphere, turning over huge amounts of nitrogen. So the cycling of carbon, oxygen, and nitrogen, which ultimately involves all species, depends on a proper balance between the activities of the producers, that's autotrophs, and consumers, heterotrophs, in our biosphere. These cycles of matter are driven by an enormous flow of energy into and through the biosphere, beginning with the capture of solar energy by the photosynthetic organisms and use of this energy to generate energy-rich carbohydrates and other organic nutrients. So these nutrients are then used as energy sources by heterotrophic organisms such as human beings, goats, cows, and fish. In metabolic processes and in all energy transformations, there is a loss of useful energy, free energy, and an inevitable increase in the amount of unusable energy, that's heat and entropy. In contrast to the cycling of matter, therefore, energy flows one way through the biosphere. Organisms cannot regenerate useful energy from energy dissipated as heat and entropy. Thus, carbon, oxygen, and nitrogen recycle continuously, but energy is constantly transformed into unusable forms such as heat. Nitrogen is present in many forms in the biosphere, such protein in plants, leaves, and fruits, as well as protein from animal sources. The atmosphere contains about 78% by volume of molecular nitrogen. However, this large reservoir of nitrogen is not directly available to living organisms. The acquisition of nitrogen from the atmosphere requires the breaking of the triple bond between two atoms, which is exceptionally stable to produce ammonia or nitrate. These reactions are known as nitrogen fixation. Nitrogen fixation can be accomplished industrially and by natural processes as shown in the figures depicting the nitrogen cycle. Under very high temperature, about 200 degrees Celsius, and high pressure, about 200 atmospheres, molecular nitrogen combines with hydrogen to form ammonia. These extreme conditions are required to overcome the high activation energy of the reaction. This nitrogen fixation reaction, called the Haber-Bosch process, is a starting point for manufacture of many industrial and agricultural products. Please note that the conversion of molecular nitrogen to ammonia is referred to as industrial fixation. Natural processes by far fix more nitrogen than industrial processes. These include lightning, photochemical reactions, and biological nitrogen fixation as shown in the diagram. Lightning is responsible for about 8% of the nitrogen fixed. It converts water, vapor, and oxygen into highly reactive hydroxyl free radicals. free hydrogen atoms and free oxygen atoms that react with molecular nitrogen to form nitric acid. The nitric acid then falls to the earth with the resultant rain. So photochemical reactions are responsible for the fixing of about 2% of nitrogen between gaseous nitric oxide and ozone to produce HNO3. The remaining 90% of N, that's nitrogen fix, result from biological nitrogen fixation, in which bacteria or blue-green algae, the cyanobacteria, fix molecular nitrogen into ammonium. Biological nitrogen fixation is therefore critical from the agricultural viewpoint, since industrial production of nitrogen fertilizers rarely meets agricultural demand. Once nitrogen is fixed into ammonium or nitrate, nitrogen enters a biochemical cycle and passes through several organic or inorganic forms before it eventually returns to nitrogen. The ammonium and nitrate ions that are generated through fixation or released through decomposition of soil organic matter is then competed for by plants and microorganisms. Plants absorb the nitrates through their roots and convert them into amino acids and proteins, which other organisms consume as their source of nitrogen. So below is the nitrogen cycle. Nitrogen in the atmosphere going through the Haber process, or ammonia, lightning and rain, through nitrogen fixing bacteria in the soil. Then you have the nitrates, and it moves back to the nitrifying bacteria into the atmosphere. Then through the Haber process, we have ammonia and chemical fertilizer moving into the nitrates in the soil and plant growth. Then it goes through into the atmosphere. We have animal compounds, excretion and decay. Decay, plant compounds decaying to ammonia. Then the cycle continues in that step. So loss of nitrogen, as shown in the diagram, nitrogen in the biosphere can be lost through mineralization, volatilization, ammonium fixation, denitrification, and nitrate leaching. Volatilization is the physical loss of gaseous ammonia to the atmosphere. Ammonification involves the physical embedding of ammonium into soil particles. Denitrifying bacteria can convert nitrates into nitrous oxide and molecular nitrogen, which are released into the atmosphere. The physical flow of nitrates dissolved in groundwater out of the topsoil and eventually into rivers and oceans is referred to as nitrate leaching. So another diagram depicting the nitrogen cycle readily displayed. So in review, nitrogen is in the atmosphere as 78%, and it is an inert gas and cannot be used by plants or animals. However, nitrogen can be converted to a usable form via lightning. Nitrogen fixing plants and cyanobacteria, as well as industrial process, energy intensive. Nitrogen limits plant growth and it is easily lost from biological systems. So the sources of biologically available nitrogen for plants include nitrates and ammonium. These are obtained from nitrogen fixing by plants to ammonia and to ammonia. Lightning, as well as bacterial decomposition of organic nitrogen, that's amino acids and proteins. Animals, on the other hand, obtain their nitrogen in organic form, such as amino acids and proteins from plants. So in bogs and lakes, places of low oxygen, nitrate is converted to nitrogen by bacteria, which obtain their oxygen from the nitrate. Warm, dry conditions such also result in the volatilization of ammonia to ammonia gas, released into the atmosphere, leaching of nitrate, erosion and fire, and also cause loss of nitrogen to